Hello, my name is Jalisa Davis, and I am a student representing the Modern and Classical Languages Department. The title of my presentation is The Voices of the Resilient, and I will demonstrate how the poem The Crime Was in Granada, written by the Spanish writer Antonio Machado, was used as a mechanism to show the government in Spain that writers would not be censored during the time of the Spanish Civil War and fascism. I will discuss the history behind the symbolic poem and how the death of Federico Garcia Lorca left an impact on the country's history that will forever be remembered as a gruesome time in Spain. Finally, I will examine the influence this poem had on other Spanish writers, giving them the courage to write against the harrowing dictatorship of Francisco Franco in Spain. I hope you enjoy. Thank you. The capital of Spain is Madrid, with a population of 46.94 million people. They have a parliamentary monarchy, and a parliamentary monarchy is a political system where the function of head of state is vested in a hereditary or elected monarch, while a government accountable to the elected parliament exercises the bulk of the executive powers, determines national policies, and oversees their implementation. They have three branches of government, which are executive, legislative, and judicial. They have 17 autonomous communities and two autonomous cities that are subdivided into 50 provinces, which are divided into over 8,000 municipalities. The Spanish Civil War began July 17, 1936, and it was caused by many factors, including major socioeconomic problems such as poverty and inequality, as well as all sides failed to compromise and respect the rights and opinions of others. This failure meant that the Second Republic could never provide a government that could bring prosperity to the country. Political violence became endemic in the country as a consequence, and it escalated into one of the bloodiest conflicts during the 20th century in Europe. There were two opposing sides. The left side, known as the Republicans, were formed by the Spanish government together with unions, communists, workers, and peasants. And on the right side were the nationalists, the rebels, landlords, and upper classes. Francisco Franco was born on December 4th, 1892, and he was a dictator that ruled over Spain for 36 years. Under his dictatorship, he persecuted his political opponents, repressed the culture and language of Spain's Basque and Catalan regions, censored the media, literature, and exercised absolute control over the country. He was associated with Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini. He was able to stay in power for so long because not only would he persecute his political opponents, he would also execute them and place his own men in all positions of power. Franco, his political team, and rebel army kept a stronghold on all aspects of life in Spain. He died on November 20th, 1975. Federico Garcia Lorca is one of the most important Spanish poets and dramatists of the 20th century. He studied law at the University of Granada before pursuing his writing career. He published his first book in 1919 and his first full-length play the year after. In Madrid, he joined a group of artists known as the Generation 27. This generation is considered the best poetry generation of Spanish literature. They introduced highly symbolic or suggestive images into their poems in an effort to convey aspects of interpersonal experience. Federico was murdered at the beginning of the Spanish War because he refused to hide his leftist political views or his homosexuality while continuing his ascent as a writer. He was arrested in Granada and was murdered by fascist forces on August 18, 1936. Antonio Machado played prominent roles in the artistic and political life of Spain. Before pursuing his writing career, he became a teacher due to his father's untimely death. His family finances had been reduced, making it important for him to secure steady employment. Later in life, he would earn a degree in philosophy, dedicating himself to poetry. His modernistic and political views grouped him into a category called the Generation 98. The Generation 98 were a group of novelists, poets, essayists, and philosophers that committed to culture and aesthetic renewal and associated with modernism. In 1938, Machado, along with other writers, fled Spain to escape capture and persecution by General Francisco Franco forces. Machado's health had been failing him for some time, and the difficult journey put too much stress on his body, and eventually he died due to long complications. He was seen walking among rifles down the long street, leaving for the cold of the countryside with the morning stars still bright overhead. They killed Federico at the break of day. The assassins never dared to look him in the face. Each of them had his eyes shut tight. God won't save you, they shouted. And Federico fell dead, blood on his clothes, lead in his back. Let it be known that the crime was done in Granada, por Granada, in his Granada. He was seen walking along with her, unafraid of the sickle. The sun was already lighting the towers. Hammers were sounding, striking and clanging in the forges. Federico spoke to her, playing up to the death. She was listening. You've made my verses ring, my dear, with the clapping of your dry hands. You've put ice into my song and honed my tragedies on your scythe of silver. So I will sing to you of the flesh you don't have, the eyes you have lost, the hair that the wind took away, the red lips where you used to kiss. Today, as always, old gypsy, my death. How good to be alone with you in these breezes of Granada, of my Granada. He was seen walking, friends, let us make a monument for the poet in the Alhambra, out of stone and dreams, above a fountain where the water grieves, and say to anyone who hears it, the crime was done in Granada, in his Granada. Machado and Lorca had a close acquaintanceship. Lorca was an internationally known literary figure by the time of his death, which was a terrible event that demoralized Spaniards. There are two main themes in this poem, and the first one that I'm going to discuss is shame. The repetition that Lorca was killed in his hometown conveys the idea that the citizens of Granada should have felt some type of shame for what took place. Machado felt as if the citizens should have somehow prevented the murder from happening. For Machado, Spaniards that were supporting Franco should easily feel ashamed for contributing to the cause of a leader that halted the forward movement of Spain's political and cultural life. The other theme is betrayal. Some people in Granada acted as spies, informing on former friends and family members. In repeating so often that Lorca was killed in his hometown, Machado sees that Lorca was betrayed by his own. Some of the effects that the Franco era had on Spanish literature was that it became censored. Writers were afraid of what the consequences would be to speak out against the dictatorship, and most writers had to find other jobs. The first stage of the dictatorship was highly repressive and boasted an official censorship that hardly allowed any room for literary explorations in the sanctioned text. Spanish cultural life after the war was tragically overshadowed by the violent deaths of prominent literary individuals. As Franco became older, his policies on the media and literature became less strict. Two writers that stood out during the Franco era were Miguel Delibes y Torrente Balestre. Both men published controversial novels throughout the 50s and 60s without the fear of the consequences they could have faced from the government. Thank you for taking the time to view my presentation. I hope you all not only enjoyed it, but learned something from it as well.